Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobben, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Good evening, and like the U-Man just said, this is Toasted Tavern, and I'm your host tonight, Michael Oh, wait, no, I'm not. I'm Scott Tobin. Unfortunately, Wags is still on the injured list, so graciously, luckily, our colleague from Toasted STL, Tom Franklin, decided to jump on with us tonight. Thank you, Tom. How are you?
Hey, doing good, man. You know, I'm looking forward to Cardinals baseball, getting back into the swing of things, and I need a little bit of distraction because all of this Blues rumor mill talk has got me kind of anxious, as you may have seen last night.
Yeah, I think a lot of Blues fans are feeling that way, and we will definitely get into some of that here in just a little bit. There's quite a bit to talk about tonight. We've got some baseball news. We've got some rumors that maybe a catcher we know could be getting an extension at some point coming up soon. Another former Cardinal catcher going into the Hall of Fame and getting his number retired. We've got that to talk about. Cardinal legend's birthday today, so just a lot of stuff to jump into tonight. But we're going to start by kind of going back a couple of days and talking about the festivities in Colorado. Unfortunately, the National League can't win an All-Star game. It seems like I think they've won like 5 in my lifetime, it feels like.
Yeah, it's pretty bad when, you know, they have to take away the whole proviso that the team that wins the All-Star game gets home advantage in the World Series because the AL kept freaking winning. You know, so it was, I mean, I know there was other reasons as well, but it's just like, yeah, it just kind of makes you wonder, you know, if, you know, the AL is truly the superior league, and of course, we're not even going to get into the whole DH talk here. I mean, everyone and their mother has had that talk at this point by now. Of course, the NL doesn't have the DH this year, but I thought it looked like a really fun time in Colorado. I mean, it was great to see fans, you know, back in the stands, full crowd. Everyone was, you know, from what I saw, the fans were very lively, and you know, as we'll talk about here, you know, it was nice to see Nolan Arenado get the hero's welcome back in Colorado.
Yeah, it really was, and you could tell how much it affected him. You could almost see the tears in his eyes as he was going to the plate there, and just a cool moment to kind of tie everything together. You know, he was there a couple of weeks ago with the Cardinals, but then to go back for the All-Star game and really get that ovation and really be able to soak it in was a cool moment for him.
Yeah, it really was. And, you know, I'm sure if you're Nolan, you know, you're kind of, you know, wondering exactly how that's going to work because, you know, you've been, you know, a part of that organization for so long. It kind of came out that, you know, he was frustrated with the organization. And of course, you know, fans can kind of take that, you know, a few different ways. But, you know, I feel that Nolan coming back to Colorado was very much akin to Albert Pujols coming back to St. Louis last year and just, well, before the pandemic at least. And just the frenzy that was behind that. It was really nice to see him getting his, I guess, just desserts in Colorado.
Yeah, you know, it would have been a storybook ending if he could have gotten a home run or something. You know, he wasn't really able to do much in the Cardinals series, so you were hoping maybe he'd have a big moment in the All-Star game. Just wasn't meant to be. But I'm sure the emotions had a lot to do with that. He was probably just trying to stay in check as much as he could.
Oh yeah, when you've done so much for an organization over the years, and then you traded from that organization and come back, you know, you've got to be at least a little nervous. I know Nolan Arenado he has such a gamer's personality, and you know that's something that's endearing him to St. Louis Cardinals fans as time goes on. I mean, he's already one of my favorite players. I don't think it was him per se, but I think someone came out in the last couple of days saying that we really shouldn't worry about Nolan Arenado and that opt-out that's coming up because he legit loves it in St. Louis. And that's, I think even Nolan would even back that up himself. So I feel privileged every day that we have Arenado. He's just that, he's not just that kind of ball player. He's just that kind of personality.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's everything that we heard. You know, he is the perfect Cardinal, kind of the same thing we heard when Goldie came here, and they've both just kind of exemplified that in their time in St. Louis.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that's one thing about Cardinals fans. You know, if you know, you come here, you play hard, and, you know, you show an appreciation for the fan base that is appreciating you. That definitely works two ways. I mean, just, you know, how many players have come to St. Louis over the years, you know, just in the last, you know, hell, even 25 years, maybe they were pending free agents and then they end up making the rest of their career in St. Louis. You had Mike McGuire, you had Edmonds, Darryl Kyle, up until his tragic passing. I mean, so many players have come from outside the organization may not fully know what St. Louis is all about, and then they fall in love with the city. I think Arenado kind of understood what St. Louis Cardinals baseball was like and how the best fans in baseball were like, and it's been a great partnership.
And hopefully the team will start playing a little better and we can get a full ballpark, because Nolan still hasn't gotten that full standing ovation that he deserves yet at Busch Stadium and gotten to experience the sea of red quite yet.
No, and and unfortunately, the Cardinals have not given fans that much of an incentive to come back to the ballpark. I mean, yes, cheap tickets help. They just had they made $6 tickets available for the rest of the season for any home game between Monday and Thursday. That's how you're feeling the heat, by poor attendance after a pandemic. That you're having to sell $6 tickets for people just to get in the ballpark, and hopefully buying concessions and merch and that sort of thing. That's kind of the hook. I know I'm going to Monday's game against Chicago, which just, it blows my mind, Scott, that in 2021 I can get a Cardinals Cubs ticket for $6. That feels like something I should have been able to do in like 1972, not 2021,
Yeah, no, it's amazing, to go to any sporting event for that price, but especially a Cardinals game and especially a rivalry game. I mean, we've seen $6 tickets when they're playing the Pirates or the Marlins or something, but you look at that schedule and you can go see them play the Cubs. You can see them play the Dodgers. You can see them play the Brewers for $6. That just doesn't happen in St. Louis real often.
No, it really doesn't. But, I'm taking advantage of it. I know a few of my friends have picked up some $6 seats, and I think if nothing else, even though I guess temporarily it kind of looks, I don't want to use the word bad, but it looks kind of, perplexing. Maybe just having the sight of a full Busch Stadium and a full and the fans, going crazy for a Cardinals team that's playing better. Maybe that will be the arm twister that gets fans back under normal conditions once again. Maybe, just maybe. But in the meantime, I mean, and not only that too, but it's like, I've gone to a couple games this year. I went to one with Wags earlier in the season, and then I went to a getaway day game a couple weeks ago. And I will say this, even though the crowds have not been full, that place gets loud for Yadi. Every single time he comes up to bat, it is like it is a hero's welcome. And we've got some news on Yadi, don't we?
Yeah, that's the rumor. Apparently, Puerto Rican newspaper said that there's a potential extension coming in Yadi's way here soon. So that's interesting news at this point in the season.
Yeah, that was definitely not surprising. And we tweeted out the post on our Toasted St. Louis Twitter account. And basically it sounds like the thing that's kind of crazy to me, Scott, is that it is not just for 2022. It might be for 2023. Now, keep in mind, Yadi is 39 years old this season. That would take him through his age 41-year season, Scott. So as I have on the board behind me here, Yadi is immortal. I think it's fair to say at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can say anything else. The guy's he's a freak of nature is what he is. It's unbelievable. And, there's a lot of people that are going to say, oh, don't bring him back for 2 more years. But why not? I mean, if nothing else, yeah, he's probably going to slow down over the next couple of years. But when you've got a young stud catcher in Herrera that's coming, who else do you want around to kind of help him and, through spring training and through some of the ups and downs than Yadi? I mean, he's the perfect mentor for a guy like that.
So the account that tweeted this out, it's a guy named Tito who is at Trevera Tops, and he has the article from the Puerto Rican newspaper here. It is the El Nuevo Dia in Puerto Rico. That's actually their Twitter handle if you want to look it up yourself. Again, the idea is that the two sides have kicked tires on a contract extension for 2022, possibly 23, should be finalized before this season is over. He goes on to say, and he's paraphrasing the article because, of course, it's written in Spanish, but he's paraphrasing, but saying Yadi is saying that he and the team are in the very beginning of negotiations. He is more concentrated on the season, but he says he would play 20 more years if he could. And Scott, I know he would certainly try.
Oh, absolutely. He may try. It wouldn't shock me if when those 2 years are up, we hear Yadi wanting another 2-year extension. I mean, he's going to play till somebody rips that uniform off of him, I do believe.
Absolutely. Even if it has to be for your local YMCA team and he's, 60 years old, you're still going to give him some game reps. That's for sure. Yadi continuing on with the tweet thread here. Yadi expects the team to play better with more consistency, returning to St. Louis Cardinals baseball. They know the division is tough. Milwaukee has a good team. And his last nugget is he expects the team to make a move by the trade deadline. So we've talked about it really since the inception of Toasted Tavern here. Scott, you and Wags have. This team needs to make a move, and no, it's not finding more 30-something pitching retreads like they have been doing for the past month or so.
No, they're going to have to go out and they're going to have to make a move. Although we may see them sign a 30-something-year-old retread because they are going to go check out Cole Hamels tomorrow, which – Cole Hamels has some ties to Missouri. His wife is from Missouri. They have some land in southern Missouri. He's been tied to the Cardinals a few times in the past. So, I mean, if Cole Hamels goes out and shows you something tomorrow, I almost think the Cardinals need to jump on that. Even if it's just for a few weeks until you get everybody back, you've got to find some innings coming up this next month to fill out this rotation.
Yeah, it's been a few years since Cole Hamels has pitched a full 200 innings or above. He did that in 2016 with the Rangers. But, he is only 2 years off pitching for the Chicago Cubs. Had 141 innings that season, a 3.81 ERA and a 1.39 WHIP, which, for a starter isn't terrible. I mean, you have to manage your expectations here because Cole Hamels is 37 years old. He will probably be 38 by the time that the season is done, or at least approaching it. So he's definitely up there in years. But this is, unlike the Wade LeBlancs and the Luis Garcias of the world, Cole Hamels is a proven performer in the major leagues. This was a guy that routinely pitched over 200 innings, routinely had an ERA at around 3 or better, for much of his career. He was a star pitcher, for the longest time in the early 2010s. And, and when you've had a track record, just looking back at his performance the last couple of years, most importantly with Chicago in 2018 and 2019, there is proven performance there very recently. So, of course, you do your due diligence on the guy. You make sure that he can still throw a fastball over 90 miles an hour, obviously, at his age and with him taking time off. But to me, that's a reasonable flyer. A guy like Cole Hamels, you give talent like that a shot, even though they may be up there in age.
Yeah, I've told a couple of people, I think Cole Hamels could be a guy. Some people will remember it was 2002. The Cardinals took a flyer on a guy named Chuck Finley and brought him in here at the end of his career, and he helped get the Cardinals to the postseason and was unbelievable. And could Cole Hamels do that for a couple of months? It's possible. But then that can't be the only move. You've got to go out and get another starter on top of that. And the guy that I think is probably the most likely guy that's going to cost you, of all the starters that are out there, I think Kyle Gibson is probably the guy that you have to think is the most reasonable for the Cardinals because the asking price is going to be a lot less for him than a Berrios or I don't think there's any way Max Scherzer is available at the deadline. But if he was, the price would be really high.
Yeah, I know that was a sexy rumor at the start of the season that maybe Washington would be able to part with Max Scherzer, but they're still in the race, I guess, in the East, and I don't think they're going to want to part with Scherzer at this point. By the way, you mentioned Chuck Finley. I thought of Woody Williams a few years ago, because whenever the Cardinals got Woody Williams, first of all, the price was very cheap at the time. He came from San Diego, and the price was an aging Ray Lankford in cash. I love Ray Lankford. He was one of my childhood heroes, but by the time we traded him, it made sense to move on from him. And in exchange, you get a guy named Woody Williams, who veteran pitcher. He was 34 at the time. He had an ERA close to 5 with San Diego. You're not expecting much, but Woody Williams was a solid pitcher for many years with the St. Louis Cardinals. So I guess part of the thinking here is if you are looking at a starting pitcher that has at least some track record and maybe their ERAs in the 4s or 5s this year, don't necessarily count them out. A change of scenery can do a lot of wonders, for a pitcher or really any position player, really.
Yeah, it really can. And, the Cardinals have a track record of finding guys like that. A guy that would be even more recent than Woody and Finley would be a guy like Jeff Weaver that they took a flyer on in 2006. I think his ERA was like 8 when they picked him up from the Yankees, and he came in here and they don't win a World Series without him.
And of course, there was also Edwin Jackson, who wasn't pitching particularly well when they got him for the 2011 run. And I mean, he was okay, but then he pitches, so well for the Cardinals that he ends up getting a big, free agency deal that season. So, and that's another thing to consider. If you're getting a pitcher that has 1 year left, or this is his final year before free agency, he wants to show the world that in the baseball world that he still has it. He's still worth your time, and he's still worth a big contract. So, I mean, I would look for a pitcher with that kind of thing riding on him as he's entering free agency. Even if he walks away from your team, he's probably not going to cost you, as much as he normally would if he had term on his contract. Maybe you get him at a discount. Maybe you don't have to give up a top prospect for him. So, I think there's options to be had there, for the Cardinals, and they've gotten creative before with these pitchers. We just threw out a few good examples. I wouldn't be surprised if they get creative again.
Yeah, I think so. I'm actually pretty excited about the second half of the season. You talked about Yadi in that article saying he expects them to play better. And I don't know if you saw this today, but Greg Amsinger, St. Louisan MLB network host, was on a other local St. Louis radio station today and threw out a little nugget at the All-Star game. He said in between commercials on one of their shows, Nolan Arenado came up on stage, gave him a hug, and whispered in his ear and said, "I guarantee you we're at least going to be in the wild card. Guarantee it." So, if the players feel that way, that's the biggest thing. If those guys believe it, whether anybody else does or not, that's the big thing right there, is that they believe that they can get back in this.
And that just goes to show you again how the value that Nolan Arenado provides away from the field, in just his personality. Like, I was captivated by Arenado during his first press conference over Zoom after he was traded to the Cardinals. I mean, I wanted him, forget being a Cardinals third baseman, I wanted him to run for mayor. I mean, he just has that kind of inspirational personality. Like you'll walk behind him when he runs through the gates of hell. I mean, he's just that kind of a guy. He has been what the Cardinals have been lacking, because I feel the Cardinals have lacked that kind of a spark plug type of a personality, a rallying guy that can, rally the players behind him. Goldschmidt's a great player. He's been a great player for a long time. He's a solid veteran, but I've never really known him to be, exactly King Leonidas, in terms of, having that type of passionate, personality that, is kind of infectious. And so I like the boldness from Nolan Arenado. It's I don't think in years past anyone on the Cardinals would have made that call. It's the Joe Namath, guarantee, to a little bit of a lesser degree. I like that he hedged his bet and at least said the wild card, and didn't say the division, because that's probably a lofty goal at this point. But yeah, we know, Scott, that, you look at the talent that this Cardinals team has up and down, the talent's there. It's there. It's just a matter of finding it in the second half. And maybe this All-Star break, Scott, was what this team needed, just to, maybe refresh a little bit.
It could be. Like you said, you refresh. And we've seen this team be a second-half team, and you saw things that you have to be encouraged with. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt started to heat up in June. He's really been hot in July. And the thing that I think a lot of Cardinal fans, the guy that the Cardinal fans have been down on, that we saw a spark from in Chicago, is Paul DeJong. And that's a totally different offense if Paul DeJong is the Paul DeJong of a couple of years ago.
It really is. And, it's kind of an understated thing with this team. I feel that Paul DeJong's struggles have kind of fallen a little bit below the radar a little bit, because, he has kind of been that Mr. Dependable over the years. He's a guy that has, solved the shortstop question, which I feel the Cardinals, throughout the 2000s up until he came along, always seemed like they had someone rotating in and out of there. They didn't have a permanent solution, really, I feel, since Edgar Renteria. So he comes in and he does the job, and he's a reliable glove. He's got pop. He's generally a reliable guy. Well, this year he hasn't been that guy. He really hasn't been that guy. And who is probably going the most crazy about that is Paul DeJong himself. he knows that he is underperforming, and he's probably got a lot of pressure on himself to get back to form. I know some people were even suggesting in the first half of the season that maybe you move on from Paul DeJong and trade him for a starter, but who's going to deal that when he has been flirting with the Mendoza line for much of the season?
Yeah, and I heard an interview on another station the other day as well where they were talking to somebody from Colorado, because a lot of Cardinal fans have pushed the Trevor Story narrative. Yes. Him and Nolan are friends, so he's going to come to St. Louis. The Cardinals are not spending that kind of money on Trevor Story when they've got Paul DeJong locked up. So, I mean, while he may have some interest to other teams, the Cardinals still believe in Paul DeJong. He's going to be the shortstop here.
I do like the GM of the Rockies was quoted today as saying that we're not everyone's farm system when he was asked about Trevor Story. And I'm like, well, you just traded away Arenado and gave the Cardinals $50 million for the privilege. So you may want to rethink that, buddy. But I also know that it felt that during the All-Star festivities when Trevor Story was getting ovations from the Rocky crowd during the Derby and then the game itself, it almost kind of felt like, not quite a send-off, but like a send-off was looming, and it's got to be hard. We're so spoiled here in St. Louis because the Cardinals, even with their issues this year, they're not like, a bottom feeder in baseball. They haven't been a bottom feeder in baseball like really since the early 90s, when they had a couple bad years in their, with Joe Torre and all that. We've been blessed by having a team that's at least average every single year, but that there is a motivation to be one of the best teams in baseball, and that's still in effect here. You would like to see the investment maybe towards, being one of the best teams in baseball, but when you go out and get Goldschmidt and you go out and get Arenado, you really don't have too much room to complain about that. But you got to feel for being a fan of like the Rockies or the Detroit Tigers or the Arizona Diamondbacks, because I mean, you talk about the Cardinals not going to games because of substandard baseball. Why would anyone in Arizona want to see the Diamondbacks right now?
Right.
I mean, it's got to be hard, and it's got to be so frustrating when you follow your team. Your team gets a superstar level talent like a Trevor Story or like a Nolan Arenado. You buy their jerseys, you throw your weight behind them, you throw your support behind them, but the front office doesn't invest in the team, and year in and year out, the team is bad. And eventually those players that you throw your weight behind decide, what, I want to actually win some ball games for once. And then they make then they move on. It has to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, we are spoiled here because, the Cardinals have had one losing season in the last 20 years, and fans, you're 8 games out of first place, and fans here are like, this team's horrible. They're the worst team I've ever seen. Like you said, imagine being a fan of the Pirates that have had 2 winning seasons in the last 30 years.
That organization is an absolute joke, and I don't empathize with a lot of Pittsburgh fans because I'm not a Penguins fan, and I feel that fan base is a little toxic. But I do empathize with Pirates fans because and not only that, but it's just like they've been bad for so long that like their misery started when they got when they got rid of Barry Bonds, way back in the 90s, and it's gotten no better. I mean, they had a couple flashes with Andrew McCutchen, leading the way, but then he moves on as well. It's just, I mean, how after so long, how can you throw your support behind a team whose front office is not nearly as invested as you are as a fan? And I'm speaking to you, St. Louis Rams fans, when I say that.
Yeah, you can't blame them because, like you said, you just see that the ownership's not invested. They're not trying to win. And, at some point you just have to say, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else and watch another sport. And, especially in a city like Pittsburgh, when you've got the Steelers and you've got the Penguins and you've got those other things that you can go watch that are winning franchises, you're not going to stick around, even though that ballpark in Pittsburgh is one of the most beautiful ballparks in the country. I've been there a couple of times, and it doesn't get a whole lot better than PNC Park.
I've never been. I have heard it. You see it on TV. It's beautiful. It's got one of the best backdrops in all of baseball. And I'm sure that inspired the Cardinals whenever, they did Busch Stadium to finally have the arch and the old courthouse and the backdrop in the outfield. I mean, that's a genius move. And it's just, you're right. It's a shame that a place like that is going to waste with a bad Pirates team, which, you kind of wonder, after a long time, I'm like, if you're a Pittsburgh sports fan and you're investing your time in the Steelers, in the Penguins, maybe you're even looking to Cleveland with maybe there's a few Browns fans that live in the area because Cleveland's not too far off. You have to wonder, if you're Pirates ownership, at what point do we just say, well, the fans have turned on us, we got to look elsewhere, and maybe uproot the team. I don't see how that can be sustainable to play bad baseball for so long and expect your fans to still be there for you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not the model you want to follow for any franchise. So it'll be interesting to see if they're ever able to turn it around. They did have the first pick in the draft this year and took a really talented catcher. So maybe that's the future of the Pirates. Maybe they'll finally hit on one and they can start to build things back up.
Yeah, he seems like a really good player. I know Pittsburgh got some flack, though, because I guess he wasn't like the premier prospect in the draft. But, I mean, he still has the makings of a pretty good player. I mean, it's just, but that's going to be another thing for that, if you're thinking of that player, okay, you just got picked number 1 overall in baseball. That comes with a certain set of, pressure that, other players in that draft don't get. And not only that, but you've got to do that for the Pirates, who need some who need a miracle to basically be 500 every year. So, it's that's kind of a raw deal for that particular player, because you get that extra pressure and it's not going to amount to wins for the team that you eventually play for.
No, I guess at that point, at least you look at it and go, okay, I've got 5 or 6 years, and then I'm a free agent, and then I start looking at my next organization.
Yeah, exactly right. By the way, Will Hartman, prayers for Wags. He's, of course, Wags is still on the injured list. Kidney stones are no joke. But he was in good spirits today. He's on the mend. He just wasn't exactly, in podcast shape, I guess you can say. He wouldn't be the best of company, but yeah, keep thinking of Wags. He's getting better. Speaking of catchers, Scott, we had some interesting news come out of the Cardinals today with one of their legends, Ted Simmons.
Yes, for anybody that hasn't heard, Ted Simmons is going into the Major League Hall of Fame in September, and the Cardinals are going to honor him on July 31st by unveiling a statue of Ted Simmons in front of the ballpark, and then his number 23 will be retired, and the image of Ted Simmons will go out on the left field wall with Ozzie and Stan and Lou and all of those legends, and it's well-deserved and way overdue for Ted Simmons.
Way overdue. He was someone that he was one of the best catchers in baseball. People forget how good he was in the 70s. I mean, this is a guy that for his career had a 285 batting average, a 348 on base, and a 437 slugging percentage. He was also a very good defensive catcher. Pitchers loved having him as a battery mate. And yeah, he was one of those guys that was definitely a snub because, of course, as if you're a baseball fan, you probably know that players have basically 10 years to get voted into the Hall of Fame, and then they drop off the ballot. Well, Ted Simmons dropped off the ballot, and this is long overdue. And I'm going to be looking forward to seeing a statue outside of Busch Stadium with all the other legends.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that. It'll be interesting to see what the pose is, if they have him at the bat or if he's in his catching gear or what they do with that pose. But I'm sure it'll be great. Those statues outside the ballpark are all amazing. And, talking about Ted Simmons, he kind of suffered from the fact that he played for the Cardinals in the 70s when the Cardinals just weren't very good. They weren't in the postseason. And you had a guy like Johnny Bench in Cincinnati that was winning World Series every year. So Ted Simmons kind of got overlooked a little bbit for the great career that he had.
Yeah, he did play in a really good era for catchers. I mean, you mentioned Johnny Bench. There was also, Gary Carter was, he was more 80s, but then, he did come along in the 70s. Carlton Fisk, just a very good era for catchers. And I guess it was very easy for a guy like Simmons to get overshadowed. He also has the distinction of being traded alongside Raleigh Fingers. Remember, Raleigh Fingers was a St. Louis Cardinal. Him and his, classic mustache, and one of the best relievers of all time. People forget that he was a Cardinal because it was only for like a couple days. The Cardinals got him, and then they shipped him off to Milwaukee, and then of course Raleigh becomes a legend with Milwaukee. So one of my favorite what ifs for the Cardinals. What if they kept Raleigh Fingers?
Well, imagine that bullpen if you have Raleigh Fingers and Bruce Sutter. That would have been interesting.
Oh man. Yeah, talk about slamming the door shut at the 8th and 9th inning. I mean, basically Cardinals just need to make sure they have a lead in the 7th, and they're good to go at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and Raleigh Fingers was again, he was so good. There's only like a very select handful of relievers that are in the Hall of Fame, and he's one of them. I think he was one of the first relievers to get in the Hall of Fame that was like spent his career as a reliever.
Yeah, he was kind of the first of that new breed of closer reliever type guy coming into the league. And you talk about Ted Simmons getting traded to the Brewers. How hard did that have to be for Ted Simmons to have played for the Cardinals all those years, been on some bad teams? Then you get to start of 1982, you got a pretty good ball club coming. You get traded to Milwaukee, and then you end up playing the Cardinals in the World Series. Man.
That had to be awkward for him. And I seem to recall that when he was traded to Milwaukee, which, by the way, he was an all-star his first season in Milwaukee, I remember he kind of took it hard. And I don't think he was exactly expecting it, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. I don't think it was going to happen. Whitey Herzog came in here and decided he wanted his catcher from Kansas City, Darryl Porter. And so he moved on from Ted, and I don't, like you said, I think he took it hard, and I don't think he expected to ever leave St. Louis. I think he thought he was going to finish his career here.
Well, and of course, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that when he does go into the Hall of Fame this September, he will be wearing the birds on bat, probably. So,
yep, I believe so.
Yeah, so chalk up another one for the Cardinals, and it'll be nice to see his number out there in the outfield as well. Finally getting his just due. Because, again, he got overshadowed, in that era, and now he's going to get recognized.
Yeah, it's going to be a good representation for the Cardinal fans at the Hall of Fame because not only do you have Ted Simmons, Larry Walker is also going in.
Yeah, it's a good year for the Cardinals, and it's kind of it was kind of sad that there was no one inducted, in the last round, but Walker and Simmons didn't, get their induction ceremony last year. So kind of worked out to where that now they can have the stage to themselves after the pandemic robbed them of that last year.
Yeah, really good. And I'm excited to see that. It'll be good to see those guys get in because they're both very, very deserving and definitely represented the Cardinals well during their time here. And talking about another Cardinal legend that has represented the Cardinals for very well for a very, very long time. Today was the 82nd birthday for Cardinal player, broadcaster, legend, the Moon Man, Mike Shannon. So happy 82nd birthday to Mike.
Yeah, Mike Shannon, of course, he is in his final year with calling Cardinals baseball on KMOX. And, say what you will about, of course, everyone has an opinion on how Mike Shannon's been the last couple of years. Of course, he's 82 years old. Cut the guy some slack. But he has been such an iconic part of Cardinals baseball. We all talk about, Harry Carey and Jack Buck, especially Jack Buck. I grew up listening to Jack Buck, but there was someone next to Jack Buck as well, and it was Mike Shannon for all these years. He's been just a phenomenal ambassador for Cardinals baseball. This is a guy that truly loves his team. He was a pretty good player in his own right too. He did have about an 8-year career, in as a member of the St. Louis Cardinals. He is a lifelong Cardinal. Not only that, but he was born here in St. Louis. This is, it doesn't get much more St. Louis than Mike Shannon, Scott.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And you talk about his baseball career, unfortunately he had a kidney issue that made him have to retire. He had health issues. And a lot of people probably don't know this. Mike Shannon was an unbelievable football player as well. He was actually recruited to Mizzou as a quarterback. And everybody says that if he would have stayed with football, probably would have won the Heisman and probably would have been a high draft pick into the NFL.
He probably would have too, and that's another kind of what if. What if he didn't have his kidney issues? Because a couple seasons before he had to hang him up in 1968, he was 7th in the MVP voting. For that year. I mean, he has, he was a pretty decent, he had pretty decent power. He was a good on base guy, but of course, everyone knows Mike Shannon as a broadcaster, and we all have our Mike Shannonisms that we remember. I think everyone can mimic his laugh. I mean, it's just one of those. That's kind of one of his signature things, and even though he's winding down his career, I am going to be sad that he's gone because, again, like I said, he was a voice of my youth growing up. I have those stories of, just driving around Southern Illinois on a late night and Jack Buck and Mike Shannon are on the radio, just kind of that, Field of Dreams-esque, idyllic, story to tell. And that's another voice, alongside the Jack Bucks and the Vince Scullys and the others that, really helped shape a lot of fans' love for baseball that's going to be going away. So, instead of, knocking the guy because, maybe he's not as, sprightly or as, sharp as he used to be, these are the last months of Mike Shannon's career. You should probably appreciate them because next year it's going to be someone else.
Yeah, it's going to be really weird to not hear Mike on the radio. And like you said, he's a legend. You put him up there with Jack and Harry and some of those great names. And hopefully Mike gets awarded the Ford Frick Award and gets into the Hall of Fame while he's still here to enjoy it, because I would hate for that to happen, after Mike passes and he not be able to enjoy that moment that he so rightly deserves.
Well, having even talked to him personally just in recent years, because he does guest appearances on KMOX in the morning, he's in fairly good health. I mean, for a man his age, 82 years old, I mean, he's not struggling. So, I mean, I hope we get to see him, at least in one of the red cars, on opening day, red Corvettes going around the stadium. I mean, he's just as I said, he's been a fantastic ambassador, 82 years old today. And, you want to talk about just living the dream. I mean, I often think of Vince Scully whenever you talk about like lifelong baseball guys. I mean, Vince Scully started with the Brooklyn Dodgers in the early 50s, and his job for his entire life was was painting the picture of Dodgers baseball in many minds. That was Shannon as well. I mean, Shannon, grows up in St. Louis, becomes a Cardinal, plays as a Cardinal, then broadcasts as a Cardinal. I mean, he's kind of like the new Red Shandies in that regard, and that he's just from birth until, retirement. He is Cardinals baseball.
He truly is. He truly is. And one quick story, one of the greatest moments of my childhood, I got to go to a Whitey Herzog golf tournament when I was a little kid and actually walk around with Whitey and Mary Lou for a while. And then when Whitey got busy, he handed me off to Mike Shannon. And I spent the rest of the day as an 11-year-old kid riding around in a golf cart with Mike Shannon, Red Shandies, Jay Randolph, and Norm Stewart, just listening to stories. And that's one of the greatest memories of my childhood. And I've had the chance to see Mike a couple of times and remind him of those days, and so Mike's got a pretty special place in my heart always.
I would have been happy just being a fly in the vicinity of that conversation. I mean, but you got to ride along with them. That is an unbelievable story. That is a hell of a cast of characters you just rattled off there.
It was. It was quite a day for a 10-year-old kid, let me tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of a hell of a day, when I say we, I mean Mason and I were talking some Blues hockey yesterday. I think we'll shift over to that here in just a little bit, but we'll do that right now. There's so much intrigue and interest in this Blues offseason. They're coming off a disappointing year, and changes are afoot. Vladimir Tarasenko wants out. He's submitted a list of teams. Jeremy Rutherford had an article in The Athletic. In case you missed Toasted Blues last night, we kind of broke down that article and tried to figure out, okay, maybe what way is he leaning? Well, Jeremy Rutherford was on 101 ESPN this morning, and I didn't get a chance to listen to it, but a friend of mine did, and he kind of told me that some of the teams that have been mentioned as possible Tarasenko destinations, JR didn't seem that enthused that, or didn't seem to get the impression that those talks were particularly going great. I mean, they've happened, but I'm kind of wondering if, this today, just as a follow-up, if JR put out the possibility of Vladimir going to the Kraken in the expansion draft is a realistic possibility. Because of his contract, because of his shoulder. I mean, Scott, when you go as far to say that it's realistic that the Blues could give Seattle extra assets for taking Vladimir Tarasenko, that means talks probably aren't going well.
No, that's not a good sign. And man, how far have we fallen that we're thinking about basically saying, here, take Tarasenko and we'll give you more just to get him out of here. I mean, that's almost unfathomable after the start of his career and how great everybody thought Vladdy Tarasenko was going to be as a Blue.
It really is, and it's kind of sad that we're even at this point with Tarasenko. I mean, it's you can say what you will about the shoulder surgeries and who's to blame and all that stuff, but the fact of the matter is that sadly, I think in the eyes of a lot of people, and that includes NHL GMs, he's damaged goods, and combined with the flat cap era, where teams aren't getting that extra, added to the salary cap every season. You almost kind of have to kind of look at these possible drastic measures. But I kind of put it out there yesterday that if the Blues lose Tarasenko to Seattle, which I think is becoming more and more of a real possibility as time goes on, one way or another, you almost kind of have to look at it as, you're not losing Tarasenko to Seattle. You're losing Tarasenko to Seattle to free up money for a Gabriel Landeskog or a Zach Hyman or an improvement on the left wing, because the Blues have a void in left wing. Even with Jaden Schwartz or without Jaden Schwartz, you're going to need at least one left winger this offseason that can play a top six role. Klim Kostin isn't ready yet. So you're looking for a Landeskog. You're looking for a Zach Hyman type. By the way, with Landeskog, it has come out, Andy Strickland has come out and said that Landeskog has rejected 4, 5, and 8-year contract offers from the Colorado Avalanche. And the amounts that they're talking about just kind of highlight how this COVID cap is just crunching teams badly right now. Reportedly, Landeskog turned down an 8-year deal with an average value of just over $5 million per season, which I'm not surprised. Landeskog made I think he's made $9 million last year, so he's not going to take that. 4-year deal for $6.5 million, 5 years for $7 million worth of 3 contracts that Landeskog has turned down. So you're kind of wondering, okay, is that the market for Landeskog? Is he because he's probably. He was a guy that I felt that even though he made $9 million last year, he earned his contract. He's a good point producer, and he's an elite two-way player. He can play really good defense for you as well, and he's a good leader. And he's only 28 years old. If you look at the sabermetrics community of hockey, he's probably valued, in a normal market, at $8.5 to $9.5 million per season. If you're the Blues, you're already going into this offseason with some decent cap space. I mean, you can still do some things even if you had Tarasenko on your roster, but you remove that $7.5 million equation out of that, you're suddenly looking at over $22 million in cap space. You have some contracts you have to give out, but then all of a sudden you really become players for a guy like Landeskog, and maybe you're able to give Landeskog what he wants. Wouldn't it kind of be ironic, Scott, if the Blues were to give Landeskog like a $9 million per year contract the year after Pietrangelo left for just under $9 million?
Yeah, that would be really interesting if that happened. I guess my question, because I read a couple of things today that said that he might be looking for a no movement clause. If that's the case, then is that a non-starter for the Blues? Because we know Army's not fond of those.
Well, yeah. Well, then again, we thought Army came out in the past and said that he wouldn't trade assets to Seattle to get them to take a player or prevent them from taking a player. Clearly, Army has shifted on that. it would be a weird thing for Army to turn on because he was so when you don't sign a guy like Alex Petrangelo, who has given so much to the organization because you are dead set about that no movement clause, it would be a very weird thing 1 year later to turn around and say, okay, Landeskog, we're going to give you that no movement clause. I think he gets a no trade offer from the Blues. I don't think Army has a necessarily an issue with no trades, because you look at the situation with Tarasenko, even though Tarasenko has a no trade, he's still opening it up to teams. I mean, it basically a no trade just kind of gives a player, I guess, some leverage to kind of maybe steer where they end up if they do get traded. Like, remember Kevin Shattenkirk a couple years ago, so adamant about going to the New York Rangers that he would not go to Tampa for Jonathan Drouin because he was so adamant about going to New York. He got his wish eventually, but then he got bought out and ended up in Tampa. LOL. But back to Landeskog. I don't think he gets a no movement from St. Louis if he signs here. But that's kind of where, again, if you free up the Tarasenko money, you have the ability to say, okay, you've gotten $7 million per offers from Colorado for 5 years. You're not going to get that no movement clause, but maybe we'll give you an extra mil, per year on your average cap value. You have a little bit more room to work with, especially in this offseason where I don't know if there's going to be a lot of teams that would be still in the chase for Landeskog if you're talking about giving him, a $9 million per year deal over 7 years. So that would play in the Blues' favor. I mean, it's going to be a weird offseason. It wouldn't shock me, honestly, Landeskog aside, if Jaden Schwartz comes back and it's on a deal that's closer to what David Perron's getting, which is about $4 million per year, because I don't see a big market for Jaden Schwartz this offseason. He had a disappointing year. He's been kind of inconsistent. He's had, he's had the injury bug, bite him a couple of times in his career. I think Jaden's going to definitely test the waters. I think he's going to see what's out there. But it wouldn't shock me, Scott, if he's disappointed in what he finds, just because teams don't have the flexibility.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's going to be a lot less than what he's looking for. And I've always been a Jaden Schwartz guy because I think he's important to this team for what he brings in the locker room. I think he's a good glue guy for this team. So I really hope that Jaden Schwartz does come back.
Yeah, I've waffled on Schwartz as the season went on because, you see the value that he brings to this team. I mean, and not only that, but this team has lost so much leadership over the last couple of years that people don't understand just how big of a blow it was. Not just to lose Petro, but you lose Alex Steen, you lose Jay Bouwmeester. Those are three big, locker room pillars that are just gone now. Schwartz has been, he's shown leadership tendencies. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a captain per se, but he's a good locker room guy. He plays hard. He works hard. Just a good human being. People love playing alongside him. He's a fan favorite, and it would be hard to see him go. And I'm maybe part of my talk here with him not getting what he wants in free agency is maybe just me kind of hoping that he comes back and doesn't go away. I wouldn't be surprised with in the case of a Schwartz, and I wouldn't be surprised, Scott, if this happens for a lot of free agents where maybe they see this COVID cap as a temporary thing, and maybe in a couple of years it'll go back up. Maybe you see, instead of the big, long-term contracts that, premier free agents typically get, maybe they go the Taylor Hall route and they just take like a 1 or 2 year deal, just to, and maybe it's at, a reduced amount. But hey, when you're on the other side of it, by then, hopefully the economy's improved, the NHL's making more money, and maybe the cap goes up. So maybe you can get that money you deserve.
Yeah, I could totally see that being the case. I think I agree with you. I think a lot of players may look at it that way. Something else I heard JR say in the last couple of days, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on. What do you think about the possibility of Torrey Krug potentially being somebody the Blues shop?
I don't think they shop him. I think there is there's a chance that he gets exposed to Seattle. just because of the contract and just because of the fact that Torrey Krug, he's a type of player that is good in situations, and I think he's good for some teams, not so good for others. There are defensemen in this league that can play on any team. Pietrangelo is one of those guys. Victor Hedman's one of those guys. I think a guy like Colton Parayko is one of those guys. He can basically play on any team, and he'd fit in no problem. But Krug at 5'9", and being really more of an offensive-minded defenseman only works in certain situations. And you got this big contract. You got a lot of years and a lot of money invested behind him. He was fine for the Blues this year. I mean, I thought he got a lot of flack from Blues fans this year for some reason, but he was basically the player that he was in Boston. I mean, he just didn't score as many goals, but he seemed to have no problem dishing out the puck. I mean, that's kind of his MO. So I don't think there's a problem with him, but if you're looking at the Blues situation going into the draft, it wouldn't shock me if he's exposed and with the idea that maybe Seattle looks at him and says, not worth the risk. That's just too much money, too much term. And he is, I don't want to call him like a situational player, but he's not an ideal, for a lot of teams. And I don't know if Seattle would necessarily benefit from having a Krug. It'd be kind of shocking if they did, though, just because, I mean, it would be kind of, I feel that the biggest drawback to doing that would be if you upset the player, because Torrey Krug chose St. Louis last offseason. He chose to come to St. Louis, and the team that he chose are just making him freely available in the expansion draft. I mean, that to me, if I were Torrey Krug, I would take that kind of as a slap in the face. I'm sure that the team would talk to Krug before it actually happens, just to kind of understand where they're coming from, but I just don't see him handling that very well. Not only that, but the Tarasenko question about whether we just let Seattle take him or give them assets to take him, I think that might resolve itself in the next couple days anyway, to where exposing Krug wouldn't even be necessary.
And talking about Torrey Krug just for one more minute, you talked about how maybe he's not the right fit for some teams. Do you think maybe that was a kind of a knee-jerk reaction by Army when he made that move? Things weren't going well with the Petro signing. That wasn't going to work out, and so they needed a defenseman, and so they just went out and got the next guy, whether it was really a fit for the system or not.
Like I said, I think Krug was fine. I don't have a problem with how he played. Was he a bit of I don't know if knee-jerk's the right word, but it was definitely Army hedging his bets, because he definitely did not have the appetite for letting Pietrangelo wait, 3 days later to make up his mind. And then by the time he made up his mind and went to Vegas, the Blues would be left with nothing. There was no other defensive free agents available that could even sniff Pietrangelo's jockstrap by the time he finally signed in Vegas. So no, I think that was Army realizing he had to act. He had to get at least someone in there, to replace Pietrangelo. And part of the problem the Blues had that season was the three best defensemen for the Blues that on the roster all played on the right side. So that was part of the reason Justin Falk had such a bad first year for the Blues, was because they couldn't figure out what to do with him, because you still had Pietrangelo and you still had Parayko, and they were still top four defensemen. And we learned early on that Justin Falk doesn't really play on his offhand very well. So getting Torrey Krug was, taking, strength from the right side. Pietrangelo goes, and then finally he can add, what he felt was a, top four defenseman on the left side. So it was part necessity for multiple reasons, but also just to kind of, it did feel kind of like a message to Blues fans that, hey, Pietrangelo's not coming back. But we're not going to just let his position go to waste. It was him being proactive. And that's the thing with Army. I mean, Armstrong does have a tendency to make bold moves like that. I mean, getting Justin Falk was a bold move. Getting Ryan O'Reilly was a bold move, and one that has definitely paid off in dividends. Trading Yuri Laterra and 2 first-rounders for Braden Shen was a bold move. So Army's not afraid to roll the dice, and Krug in some ways felt like a roll of the dice, but it was a calculated one.
So as we're starting to roll towards the end of the show, one more Blues question before we kind of start to wrap things up. Any concern on your part, Colton Parayko, with the back going into next year, that he's going to have issues and not going to be the same player going forward, that could be a lingering thing?
Backs are tricky. I mean, anyone that's had back issues, that I'm preaching to the choir there. Thankfully, I haven't, but I know people that have. The best thing for a back injury is rest. There's sometimes heat works, sometimes ice works. That's, there's a lot of different ways you can approach a back injury, but one thing seems to be a consensus is that rest is a good thing. And Parayko is going to have a full off season to rest, to let his back fully heal. I don't think it was fully healed when he came back during the season, but the Blues were so badly thin at defense, they needed him to come back. I think Parayko will be better next year. I'm confident he will. I'm confident Parayko will do what needs to be done to make sure that he's back, because Parayko has one more year left on his contract, and then he's a free agent. He's got something to prove. We were just talking about in baseball how players with expiring contracts might perform better after they're traded, just to prove that they have, what it takes. I mean, Parayko's got to prove that as well. I mean, we were talking about Parayko being a franchise number one defenseman for the Blues for the longest time, and in the last couple of years, his performance has sagged because of his back. So, he needs that big contract. He needs to prove that he's worth that big contract. And so I'm confident Parayko will be back next year, no pun intended.
Well, that's good to hear. Switching topics real quick before we get out of here. I don't know if you heard today, but the U.S. Olympic team is getting ready for the Olympics to head across the pond. And one of our St. Louis representatives is not going to be with the team. Bradley Beal is going to miss the Olympics because of COVID protocols and some issues. And I was shocked. How are you this close to actually going to the Olympics and your players aren't vaccinated?
I honestly, at this point, I don't know. Everyone knows the risks at this point, of not being vaccinated and the potential of getting COVID. And yes, I get it. You have the right to not get the vaccine. We're not, no one is talking about trampling your rights to make your own decisions, but we are influenced by what is around us. We are influenced by society, and we are influenced by our careers. Bradley Beal has a career where he makes, a lot of money to play a game. I would think that, players, whether it's football, basketball, whatever, would do whatever it takes to preserve the ability to do just that, continue making a lot of money playing a game. Now, that being said, there have been, I don't want to come out and say that it hasn't, I don't think it's been, Beal has said whether or not he's been vaccinated, but there have been cases where, people that have been vaccinated still get, test positive for COVID-19. That's still a thing. It's just that the symptoms aren't as, severe. It's almost like getting a bad cold. The danger with getting COVID still, even if you're vaccinated and if you have that COVID, disease in you, is spreading it to others that have not. So people know there's no one on this planet that doesn't realize the dangers that COVID can bring. And anyone that says otherwise is just being foolish. We all know the risks. It's up to us to mitigate those risks. And, I don't know what happened in Beal's case. I mean, if I were him, and going into the Olympics, knowing that that's coming up, I'd probably, tape bubble wrap around myself and, we'll go around in public and make sure I don't get hurt or, but it's unfortunate. And it's just another one of those cases of COVID derailing at least a player or a team season that we've seen all too much. And hopefully at some point we can finally kill this virus.
Yeah, let's hope so. And I jumped the gun there with him possibly not being vaccinated, but I think that's just the frustration from everything we're hearing going on in the world right now with people not doing it. Hopefully, like I said, maybe Bradley did all the right things and it's just a case where it, something happened anyway. But
by the way, before we go, a little story time here. Derek King says he doesn't see an Arizona Cardinals logo up here yet. There's a backstory to this here. So I had tweeted this week about the St. Louis Rams lawsuit, that's been playing out in court, and I noticed it got a lot of response, from fans just as frustrated as I am about that whole situation. And one aspect that I hadn't really touched on was the fact that it's kind of come out that Clark Hunt, the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, really was instrumental in making sure that Stan Kroenke got his way. He was the lone vote against the Carson project, which would have been the Chargers and the Raiders project. And it disappointed me greatly because for many years, I couldn't even watch the NFL without being angry. And only recently have I started to kind of realize that just having that much hate for something in your heart is just not healthy. So I tried to get back into it with the Saints. That didn't take. I tried to get back to my old Packers. That didn't take. Kansas City was hooking me because I like Pat Mahomes a lot. They're the in-state team. And yes, they were a very good football team that went to the Super Bowl. So, I was just about ready to say, okay, I'm back. I'm a Chiefs fan. Let's go. And I know the Clark Hunt thing was always kind of rumored, with the whole Rams proceedings. But I guess seeing that in like hard form, having that confirmed, just really kind of shook me a little bit. So I posed a question on my Twitter at Tom Franklin STL. Okay, if you were me, should you stick with the Chiefs? Or should you go with one of the two teams that voted against the Rams leaving, which were the Chargers, and as we learned in court this week, the Arizona Cardinals, which is interesting because say what you will about the Bidwell family, they have been low key pro STL, pretty much this whole time. Like I think even Derek King pointed out something that where I think Michael said that if he could do it all over again, he wouldn't have left St. Louis. And of course, that's an interesting situation too, because history has kind of shown over time that the Bidwells were probably justified in leaving. They were getting a raw deal from the city at the time over the stadium. At least when you compare that situation to Kroenke, that it definitely makes them look better. So, and then I asked it, is there another team that I should follow? Well, first things first, the poll on that there's been over 300 votes on that poll, by the way. This has got people talking. Over 86% say that I should become a Cardinals fan. This isn't St. Louis, by the way. This is a St. Louis Twitter account, a St. Louis sports fan asking people in St. Louis, should I be a football Cardinals fan again? That just goes to show you how much time heals old wounds, by the way. But a funny thing happened. I did tag the Arizona Cardinals Twitter account in my post. And I do have a blue check mark. I do have Twitter verification. I kind of knew a guy who kind of helped a bunch of radio people at KMOX, including myself, get Twitter verified. I recommend it, by the way. If you think you're influential, go for that Twitter blue check mark because it gives you some superpowers. Like for instance, the Arizona Cardinals themselves responded with a GIF saying, after I suggested I become a Cardinals fan, they responded with a GIF basically saying, please come to Arizona, please be a fan. And like after going through the Rams experience and feeling just like I was completely unwanted, throughout that whole ordeal, it felt nice to be wanted again. It just felt nice to be wanted again by a team. So I responded with this through the suggestion of Brock Banner, who writes for the STL Fan Report, that maybe I should ask them for like a bumper sticker, or just something to as a signing bonus, just as a just for laughs, basically. So I did that, and they replied, "We'll see what we can do." And right after that, they DM'd me, and they actually said, "What's your shirt size and what's your address?" So in the coming week, I'm going to get a package from the Arizona Cardinals. And, of course, I'll definitely share that with you guys as to how it goes. But in some odd happenstance, Scott, I'm probably going to end up being an Arizona Cardinals fan after all this in 2021. And I know I'm setting myself up. I've been warned by multiple people that being a Cardinals fan will just be disappointing and frustrating. But Scott, we were St. Louis Rams fans. We know what that's all about. We're prepared.
We do, and there is that tie to Arizona, from their years here with the Bidwells, and that's an exciting young team with Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, and they brought in J.J. Watt. So who knows? Maybe you get on the bandwagon and they win, and maybe we should all jump to Arizona. Maybe the Cardinals should become the official team of Toasted SCL. What do you think?
That's a possibility. I mean, that Chiefs logo right below you there, Scott. I'm starting to kind of look at it with a little bit of a side eye there. So, maybe we should start getting some roots. By the way, it is also worth noting that airfare to Phoenix, you can get it for pretty cheap. It's one of those places that, like, if you go to like an Allegiant or a Spirit Airlines, very cheap to get to Phoenix. So if you were thinking of going out there for a football weekend, would not be that expensive to do. So that's something to kind of think about there as well.
And you know what? We actually have we actually have a connection. Jerry Holloway, who used to play for the football Cardinals, and when they're in St. Louis, is still connected to Arizona. He actually goes out to Arizona. They have him come out and sing the national anthem before Cardinals games quite often.
That's cool.
So maybe we can get a connection. Maybe the Cardinals become the official team of Toasted.
Possibly. And of course, our friend Derek King at Gateway City Sports just interviewed Howard Balzer on Monday. Balzer, longtime St. Louisan, just moved out to Arizona so he can cover the Cardinals. So maybe we should follow Howard Balzer. I mean, he wouldn't lead us astray. I mean, he's one of the more famous football scribes of all time. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean, if the H-Man's going out there, we might have to follow.
Yeah, we might have to. And by the way, I encourage you guys, if you didn't see Derek King's interview with Howard Balzer on Monday, we did share it on the Toasted Tavern page. Feel free to check that out. It's a really good interview. They talked about, they didn't talk about the Cardinals. They talked about the St. Louis Rams lawsuit. Of course, Balzer would have definitely front row seats to some in-depth knowledge on that. So I encourage you guys to check that out. Derek, if you're still watching or listening, maybe we can get you on Toasted Tavern at some point to maybe kind of talk about your perspective on that whole thing. And, maybe you can either back me or dissuade me from being a Cardinals fan. We'll see.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that, Derek. If you're watching, hit us up. We'll set up a interview, get you on the show.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, I think that's going to do it for tonight.
Yep, absolutely, Tom. Thanks for jumping on with us. Hopefully, when we roll back next week, Wags will be off the injured list and back to his duties, and things will go back to normal. But thanks for filling in. It was a fun show tonight.
It was really fun, and I just encourage you to, as we're going to scroll here at the bottom here, hopefully any moment here, hashtag pray for Wags.
There we go.
Let's make it official. Kidney stones suck. We should outlaw kidney stones. Wags, again, if you're just joining us, Wags is in good spirits. He seems to be doing better, but continue. Hashtag pray for Wags. Spam it.
There we go. So, all right, Tom, thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks everybody for watching. Make sure you tune in every weeknight at 9:00 for Toasted Tavern. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those fun things. And we will see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Hey, it's you-man here from Casey. For all your sports news, catch the Toasted Tavern with Scott Tobin and the man called Wags, weeknights at 9 p.m. You can follow Toasted Tavern on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Let's get toasted.